Hello, Year 5 and 6. So with our class read on Friday, we left it that Daniel had managed to get the Book of Wonders back. So let's find out what happens. Chapter 28, Reunited. The wings of the surviving magpie flashed in the darkness as Daniel raced through the passageways. His fingers gripped the Book of Wonders tight. He did not know or care where the bird was leading him, so long as it was away from Sharp. Everything seemed darker than before. The shadows were deeper and the silence suffocating. Again and again, Daniel thought he saw something shifting in the gloom. He imagined Sharp posing as a statue, detaching from the shadows to make a grab for the book. What now? What could be done to stop a madman? Sorry about that. What could be done to stop a madman? How much time was there to save the Emporium now that the fountain was gone? And what could he do about it alone? The sound of splashing from around the next corner stopped Daniel dead. Steep steps led to a flooded passageway. The water was waist deep. Shattered diamonds of light sparkled on the dark surface, cast from the lamps lining the walls, some of which were still lit. A lone figure was wading through the water towards him. "Ha ha, Ellie!" He felt such relief that he actually laughed out loud. He crashed down the stairs, slipping under the surface for a moment, taking in an unpleasant gulp of salty water, which shot out of his nose as he coughed and spluttered. "Ellie, it's me!" Ellie, who had been staring into the water as she waded, looked up. Her eyes grew wide. "Daniel," she cried, "I've been looking all over for you since our search party got back. The place is in ruins. I've just come from the hospital. The staff are in a bad way. Caleb told me you'd rushed off." She paused and stared at Daniel's bloodied face. "What happened to you?" "There's so much to tell you," said Daniel. "I'm pretty sure your father is alive and he's in the Emporium." Daniel told her about Sharp's idea of using the book to find silver and how it had backfired. "I think it was a message," she said. "Your father doesn't want to be found." "But he's alive," said Ellie, hopping on the spot. "Thank you, Daniel. I couldn't stop picturing him dying all alone in some dark corner." She hugged Daniel tight and then broke away, looking serious. "He's still ill, though, isn't he? The Emporium's falling apart. He can't hold it all together. So why doesn't he want us to find him?" "It's not us he's hiding from, Ellie," said Daniel. "It's Sharp. You were right about him all along. He's dangerous." Daniel took a deep breath. "He wants to kill your papa." "He what?" "Kill him and steal the Book of Wonders. That's why he's here. He's been chasing Mr. Silver for a long time. He's obsessed with the book. He'll do anything to have it, and the book won't work properly for him unless Mr. Silver hands it over or Sharp beats him for it. It's the reason your father makes the Emporium move around so much. He's running away. I think that's why people from outside can't see you. It's your papa's way of protecting you. I'll bet it's the reason he won't let you leave the shop too. It's all to keep you safe from Sharp." Ellie's mouth moved wordlessly before she found her voice. "How do you know all this?" "Sharp told me himself," said Daniel. And the story began to spill out of him, how the magpies had led him to the fountain, how he'd only just escaped with his life after stealing back the book, how one of the birds had not been so lucky. Ellie's hand went to her mouth. "He wrecked the fountain, and he did that to you." She pointed to Daniel's swollen lip. He could still taste the blood, and the salt water nipped at the wound. "I'm sorry," said Daniel. "I've messed everything up. I should never have let him in. All I ever wanted to do was help. I don't want to lose the Emporium, or Mr. Silver, or you." To his surprise, Ellie smiled her crooked smile. "All that matters now is what we do next. We can still turn things around." Daniel thought for a moment. "If we can get rid of Sharp," he said, "I reckon Mr. Silver will come back. Why didn't Papa just stand up to him in the first place?" Daniel knew what Ellie was thinking, that Mr. Silver was a coward. He'd even thought the same himself at first. "I don't think it's as simple as that. Your papa is weak. All the years of running the Emporium on his own have taken his strength away. I think he knew what was coming. He could sense Sharp getting close, and he knew he wasn't strong enough to fight." "That would explain the unicorn blood," said Ellie. "It was desperation, a last attempt to get some of his strength back so that he could get rid of Sharp." "I think so," said Daniel. "Only something went wrong." Ellie stroked the walls of the Emporium. "All these years I was sure he was keeping me in the shop so he wouldn't be lonely. I was always so angry at him. He's been protecting you. It's what they do, mums and dads." So what do we do, said Ellie. How can we get rid of Sharp? Everyone's got a weak spot, said Daniel thoughtfully. We've got to find Sharp's. But how? It's not like we can go and have a chat with him, is it? Get his life story over a nice cup of tea and some Empire biscuits. He's dangerous. Life story? The words echoed in Daniel's ears. He stared at the book and began to flip through the pages, gathering speed as the idea properly formed. He heard Mr. Silver's voice far off in the horizon of his memory from his very first lesson. I am a fan of stories, a collector, and there is no greater story than that of life. The Library of Souls holds on its many shelves the life story of everyone who has ever lived, everyone who will ever live. Daniel stopped flipping, and there it was, staring back at him from the page in all of its dark, impossible glory. He flashed Ellie a clever smile. Who says we need to talk to Vindictus Sharp to find out about his past? He said, This is the Nowhere Emporium, Ellie. Follow me. Chapter 29, Stolen. Edinburgh, July 1897. Michelle Sharp giggled as she walked arm in arm with Lucian through the Emporium's growing number of corridors. What have you made for me this time? She said. It cannot be more beautiful than the Crystal Lake. Lucian allowed himself a smile. He created a new wonder for Michelle every evening since they had met. One door led to a room made entirely from velvet smooth chocolate. Another revealed a trek through the branches of an enormous Christmas tree, the aromas of roasting goose, spiced mincemeat and coal dust dancing in the air. It had taken him all evening to create the music mine, a vast cavern dotted with brightly coloured jewels that filled the air with beautiful melodies when they were plucked from the walls. Lucian led her up a staircase to a solitary door. What is it? She asked. Open it and find out, he said. She reached for the handle, opened the door and took a few hesitant steps into the room beyond. It's a garden, she said, barely able to speak through her amazement. She was right, it was a garden, an overgrown wilderness of plants and flowers and trees, but every petal of every flower was made of fire. The world inside this impossible room was dark, lit only by the flicker from the flaming plants, blues and greens, reds, yellows, oranges. It's a fire garden, said Lucian. I thought of you when I made it. He blushed as she turned and stared into his grey eyes. It's perfect, she whispered, and she began to wander around the garden. Lucian watched. You can touch the flames if you like. They won't burn. Michelle reached up, touching her fingertips to the flaming blossom of a tree. Burning cinders fell to the ground, but her skin did not burn, and she laughed and stared around like a child. I have a surprise for you, Lucian said. Another surprise? He took her arm, led her through an archway of creeping ivy to a clearing surrounded by apple trees, each apple a ball of softly glowing fire. In the centre of the clearing sat a table loaded with food. Lucian pulled out a chair for Michelle, keeping a keen eye on her as she sat. Is something the matter? He asked. You look a little sad. She shook her head and smiled. How could I be sad in a place like this? Then she nodded to the feast. May I try something? It all looks so delicious. They began to eat, talking as they loved to do, about running away together to desert islands and exotic cities where nobody would ever find them. Another drink, said Michelle, and she stood and poured 2 large glasses of wine, handing one to Lucian. She raised her glass. To you, Lucian, and your wondrous emporium. Lucian clinked his glass against hers, and took a long sip of the wine. He knew something was wrong at once. The garden began to spin and blur around him. A distant echoing ring filled his head, and he saw nothing but blurred streaks of fire. He dropped his glass, and it shattered on the grass, wine spilling like blood. Lucian grasped at the table. As the corners of his vision faded to black, the darkness began to close in around him. He was falling. The last thing he saw before he hit the floor was Michelle, his broken vision fragmenting her face into many pieces. He reached out for her. She did nothing but watch. Lucian was wakened by a slow rhythmic pounding in his head. He screwed up his eyes to the surrounding fire plants, grabbed hold of the table and hoisted himself up. He did not know how long he had been unconscious. Every bit of him ached. The table lay as he remembered. There were half-finished plates of food, and Michelle's wine glass lay empty beside her plate. Lucian's glass popped and snapped beneath his feet as he stumbled around. Nothing made sense. What had happened? Where was Michelle? The mist in his mind began to thin. A thought struck him. Dread choked him as he reached slowly into his coat pocket to the place he kept the Book of Wonders. His fingers found nothing but material. His pocket was empty. More to the point, someone had emptied it. Michelle was gone. She had taken the Book of Wonders with her. Oh.